Oh, sorry. Okay, I see that. Thanks for all the thanks for all the signs. I see that I was having my sound was off. So okay, let's start here. We're a few minutes in, but that's okay. We don't have as much material as normal. Hopefully, everybody can hear now. And okay, let's begin. My name is Kevin Mosher. I'm a partner at the law firm Thompson Co. and the St. Paul office. And this is the February version of the HR Best Practices webinar series. Every month we do these, and I never would have foreseen that I was going to be doing one on Trump and in the HR context. So caveat on how good my prognostication skills are on this, but I'm going to try to prognosticate today on what I think some impacts are going to be for HR. Okay, great. People seem to be able to hear me. Thank you. So a couple things. Thanks for attending. If you're new to this, on the right side, a lot of you have found it. There's an ability for you to write questions. I'll look at those from time to time during the webinar and then try to address them. If I don't get to the webinar, if I don't get to the question that you have, then I will do a little Q&A and send that and email that out to everybody. And I did it today for the one from a month ago, the I-9 webinar. So they're not always exactly perfectly timed, but they eventually get out to you. And so I do really appreciate the questions that you get. If you need your SHRM or HRCI credit or CLEs, those certifications will be emailed to you after following the webinar in the next few days. Big caveat: I am sick. I don't know if it's allergies. It might be allergies. It's been lingering, but in any event, I've been coughing a lot, and so instead of coughing into the microphone for the next hour, I normally don't do this, but I decided to take some sort of medication. So the combination of me taking supposedly non-drowsy medication and then talking about HR and politics, if I say something that you find personally offensive, apologies up front. I don't think I will. But just in case, I'm going to blame it on the supposedly non-drowsy medication that I took. But the good news is, I don't think I'm going to cough into the microphone as a result, or sneeze into the microphone. So, there are pluses and minuses to all of this. Okay. Now, sorry about the mute thing. It's a good thing. Good thing we have the question and answer. Otherwise, I'm just sitting here and I would have no idea that nobody can hear me, so thank you for that. Okay, so we are going to, this is again prognostication. A year from now, it could be entirely different what occurred or didn't occur or might occur in 2017 and then going into 2018. But I think we have some themes, and certainly the immigration theme, we've already started to see that one play out. So I think we can talk fairly intelligently on that one. The EOC, we'll talk about that. We're starting to see that form a little bit. A lot of these other topics, they're just kind of holdover topics in many ways from the Obama administration. And how long they stay on the scene or don't stay on the scene, it's hard to tell. Things seem to be a little chaotic right now, and I would just say, like, we don't seem to have a real theme overall on a lot of these topics, and maybe that's by design. Maybe there's not a lot of interest in that, and so I guess we'll just see on a lot of these. But let's talk about what we do know, or what we at least can infer from the new administration. Based on things that have been said on a lot of these topics. Okay. Okay. So what do we know about President Trump? We know that clearly immigration is a top priority, right? He has spoken about executive orders being a top priority. In issuing and using the power of the presidency to make changes fast and make changes through executive orders. Now, already we have seen that And President Obama had the same thing. Issue executive order. It's easy. Congress isn't doing anything, so President Obama was issuing executive orders, and every once in a while, the executive order or the regulation would be put on hold by the courts, and the judiciary would step in. And so we've already seen that with President Trump on the immigration executive order that we'll talk about a little bit more in depth in a minute. But the top priority from the Trump administration was to use the executive order authority of the president to get a bunch of these changes as quickly as possible, and to direct the agencies to start making changes and writing regulations and that sort of thing as quickly as possible. And because the nice thing with the executive order is you don't have to go through Congress, you don't have to wait through committee and do all that. You can just issue an executive order, and then hopefully the courts don't take umbrage with it and put it on hold, but or normally they don't. So the executive order can be pretty fast. It can be pretty impactful, particularly for the federal government and its employees, and then federal contractors and subcontractors, which the executive orders often, in an HR context, cover. We've also heard a lot about Obamacare, about the Affordable Care Act, and repealing that. And right now, I know there's general talk that there's a plan, but I don't think there's actually a plan out there on like what to do. But I think there clearly is a lot of enthusiasm and energy behind the Affordable Care Act and repealing that. So I think we can at least assume that. Well, I would be very surprised if by 2 years from now, if we're still talking about employer mandates and some of the more onerous aspects of the Affordable Care Act. I guess I would be pretty surprised. And then government agencies. The president has talked quite a bit about scaling back government agencies, and maybe again, we'll talk about more in depth, but I would not be surprised if we see a lot of action at government agencies where there's less enforcement, and on especially enforcement of rules and regulations from prior administrations against employers, just generally. So I would not be surprised if we see some government agency review, streamlining, that sort of thing. Okay. On immigration, there we go. On immigration reform. So a few things have started to come to light. Clearly, we've already got the refugee issue, crisis, or whatever you want to call it. But we've already got that. But one other issue, and the issue that's been on businesses' mind since, well, a long time, over 10 years. And if those of you, if you like me, you remember. So today, okay, I'm going to back up. Today is, and I don't know how many of you have heard about it or if it's impacting you at all, but it's like basically National Don't Go to Work Day for immigrants. And so there are, I assume, rallies and maybe parades, that sort of thing. But it's a social media campaign to get people who are immigrants to not go to work today, to illustrate to the business community how how important immigrants are to the workforce. So I would, putting words in the organizers' mouths, that's probably what they're looking for. So the upshot is that the deli right across the street from us is closed now for lunch. So everybody in my office is having a minor crisis, trying to figure out where to eat. For many of you, it might be impacting, and people might not have shown up for work today. Okay, so a little over 10 years ago, about 10 years ago, when Congress under the Bush administration, Bush II administration, was looking at immigration reform, there were the Cinco de Mayo parades where a lot of people were leaving work and they were protesting and they were going out on the parades, and all that was happening. And so we saw a lot of enthusiasm for that. Nothing ended up coming out of that. It barely, it didn't. It passed it passed the Senate, but then didn't make it through the House. So the concept of immigration reform died. Well, one of the big issues with immigration reform at the time was the H-1B, and it's gotten even bigger as Silicon Valley and the tech sector has continued to grow in the United States. And so H-1B visas, the business community has been, and the Chamber of Commerce and all that have been asking for years and years and years for more of these visas. Ever since we went down to 65,000 bachelor visas and 20,000, and then we got bumped up for 20,000 for master visas, they've, since the Great Recession, those visas have all gone immediately, like day one or week one, to applicants. And so in the last few years, for example, there have been over 200,000 applicants for these visas. So this is, companies around, maybe your company, but companies around the country saying, hey, we need these highly skilled, specialized workers. A lot of tech and computer workers, but it could be engineers for sure. Could be certain business specialties as well, accountants, that sort of thing. And the business community has been applying, and over 200,000 of those applications have gone out for the last several years, and there are only a potential 85,000 total aggregate available every year. And so from the business community's perspective, they want more. They want more of these visas, and that's where the conversation has been for over 10 years now, that we want more and more and more. And now we're looking at a total potential change where not only do you not get more, but this administration, at least there have been some leaks and talks about it, are looking to make it much more difficult and expensive for businesses to apply for these visas. So for example, when we do most green card, business-based green cards, we have to go through a recruiting process, right? It's where you post in the newspaper, and you have to get a prevailing wage certified by the Department of Labor. You have to do that as well if you're sponsoring like H-2 visas, H-2A visas, and like agriculture, for example. And there's talk about maybe having that be a requirement. So right now we have to pay prevailing wages, but we don't have to get that prevailing wage certified. Well, it would more than double the cost, mainly double the legal fees that companies have to pay to try to get one of these H-1B visas. Well, that would be a back-end way of restricting companies, especially small companies, who, it would maybe be cost prohibitive. But also then those wages are likely to be higher. Just the reality of it, it's sometimes you have to, you might have to pay higher wages if you have to go through that. So it's unfortunate that that's where the conversation's going, but that seems to be where the conversation's going. One other issue, not on the H-1B side, but on L-1 visas, for those of you who sponsor foreign nationals who might work at like your facilities overseas, you might bring them over on an L visa, like a manager or a specialized employee if they're working, let's just say in China or something, that you want to bring them over to work for you. Those are L-1 visas. The new administration is talking about doing audits within 6 months every time an L-1 visa comes in. And again, normally these are like highly skilled, highly paid foreign managers coming over, and the government is thinking about doing some spending a lot more money on auditing these people. TN visas. For those of you unfamiliar with TN visas, NAFTA, one of the well, as far as HR is concerned, the most important part of NAFTA is that it created the TN visa category. So it allows just Canadians and just Mexican workers to come over on a TN visa. And you can't get a green card off a TN visa, but a TN visa is essentially, as long as NAFTA exists, a TN visa allows Canadians and Mexicans to come up and work in various professions in the United States. And it's really easy to get the TN visa. In Canada, you get it at the embassy through the application process, and if you're Canadian, you can just like get it at the border or at the airport, and so it's easy and it's renewable, and you get them for 3 years, and it's easy to come down and work in the United States, and so it brings in a lot of workers from Canada and Mexico in these a variety of professions, and it's uncapped, and so a lot of people could come in on that. But with the president talking about getting rid of NAFTA, NAFTA being a bad deal and unfair and all that, well, that the TN visa might go away. And so what would that look like for people who are currently here on a TN visa? Well, if NAFTA were repealed, I think technically, we'd have to see how that plays out. They probably would build in some sort of wind down, but once that goes away, the TN visa would be pulled, and so anybody working for the company on a TN category visa, if they're Canadian or Mexican, would lose their work authority, and so you'd probably have to find a new employee, or you'd have to transfer them to H-1B, which would be a problem if there are fewer H-1Bs and if it's harder to get H-1Bs. So heads up, watch out for that, because I can see, NAFTA looks to be one of those areas where there might be some movement, and it could be repealed or changed. And if it were, it could have a serious impact on any of your employees who are currently here on TN visa. And again, like I said earlier, you can't go from TN to green card, so that would be a real problem, because like right now you would want to think about maybe sponsoring those people for green cards, but really what you should probably be doing is looking to sponsor them for H-1B and then moving them to green card. So if anybody has any questions, you definitely can ask me, send me an email or call me on that. And then we have the travel restrictions, and I don't know if any of you ever have heard about this executive order on the restriction of travel, but it's something the president, I think he had even talked about it on the campaign trail, about keeping people out of the country. And so he signed this executive order, and it basically it picked on seven countries, and it basically said for the next 90 days. There was also a 120-day protocol, but in any event, for 90 days they're going to limit these people from coming into the United States, even after they've gone through what could be like a 2-year vetting process overseas. That didn't matter. They're just going to put a ban for 90 days on these people. And so then it got appealed by the states of Washington and Minnesota, and there are a lot of appeals all over, but the state of Washington and Minnesota got in first, and it got appealed up, and there was a temporary restraining order issued putting a stop to this. So it basically messed up the airports, and almost 100,000, I think it's about 80,000 people were ultimately impacted, which seems like quite a number of people. But one of the problems with the executive order was that it limited people who were here on green card status from these countries from coming back, and that's almost like that's a little bit of a bridge too far. People on green card status are like next step to being citizens, and they're considered permanent residents of the United States, and so a little bit different than people who are like refugees and asylees. People who are on green card status, serve in the military and that sort of thing. So definitely, and could be here for decades. Because they're, indefinitely can stay in the United States. So the administration tried to back off on the green card people right away, but unfortunately the executive order was written the way it was, and you don't get to just take a highlighter and wipe it away, just say, I didn't mean that part. That's not how laws work. So in any event, it's on hold. It's probably going to be well, it is indefinitely on hold. The TRO was lifted, and a permanent injunction was placed pending the case. But more likely than not, we're going to see something else. So this is just battle number one on this on this refugee issue. So many of you might have had some employees impacted by this. It certainly will hurt recruiting efforts if you're trying to recruit employees from any of these seven countries. But it also sends a message, these aren't huge employee pools for most employers, but I think it does send a message to other countries that do send a lot of workers over here, particularly if you're like Indian or Chinese, and it generally might make the United States a less hospitable place to want to come and try to work. So recruiting efforts overseas might be problematic. We'll see what happens. I suspect there will be a new executive order issued at some point in the next week or two or so that has a much better chance of not being put on hold by the government. Last thing on immigration is e-verify, and so most Republicans you would not expect would want e-verify to become mandatory. But this Republican seems, because of the immigration issue and because of the populism, the idea of putting a greater onus on employers to take responsibility for illegal workers. It's the type of thing we normally we normally see out of more democratic uh, presidents and the party and stuff, which is to kind of look at employers and make them take more responsibility, and e-verify being one of the ways. But this president, I would not be surprised, so I'm going to prognosticate a little bit, I would not be surprised if he eventually gets around to mandating e-verify. It's been encouraged, it's been rolled out, e-verify is growing, it's been growing as a program, and certainly all federal contractors have to do it, and so that captured a lot of people, but a lot of companies, but it has yet to be mandated for employers, but we're moving in that direction. We were moving in that direction during the Obama administration, and under this administration, I can see that my guess would be that we will continue to move down that. So if you are unfamiliar with e-verify, I've been saying it for 15 years. Get familiar with e-verify. There's a lot of information on the uscis.gov website /e-verify, e-verify. So you can find a lot of information there. You might want to consider it. There are pros and cons with e-verify. If you have a suspicion that you have a bunch of illegal workers working for you, and if that's your or if that's your population that you need to recruit from for your business, like that's just where you get your workers, and you don't ask questions, but you do the I-9 and you just go about your business, then e-verify is probably not for you. But if you're just because it's going to limit the number of employees that you can recruit, but if you're not in that situation, e-verify is probably something you should actively consider and get familiar with in HR. Okay, before I move on to labor, let me see. Somebody asked, am I saying that it costs $20,000 for a visa that they have to earn 20,000? I'm not saying either of those things. So that was on the master's issue. So every year there are 65,000 H-1B visas for people with bachelor's degrees, and there are 20,000 available. There are 20,000 available for the master's degree program. If you've gotten your master's degree from a U.S. university, then, but that's not the cost. That has nothing to do. That just has to do with the numbers. Okay, right to work, National Labor Relations Board. Well, here is, for those of you in the South, you are well familiar with right to work. It is starting to, right to work concept has been it's really been well advocated for, and it's got a nice name, right to work. It's not accurate, but it's a nice name, and I'm sure somebody, whoever came up with it in some consulting or marketing agency should get some kudos, because I think it's pretty good. You can see the map to the bottom right, the states that have right to work and the states that don't. For the most part, they follow along political lines as well. Go figure. But right to work as a general concept is that if you're in a right to work state, it means that the union cannot force you to pay union dues, like all the union dues. It allows you to opt out of paying the non-bargaining related union dues. So that's a nice way of saying I'm not going to pay for the political garbage from the unions, and I don't want to pay all this slush fund and all that slush fund. And it sounds great, and it's a way of taking away money from the unions, and that's a fight worth having, right? So that's the whole right to work thing, and in a lot of these states, it the right to work is in many ways, because it's depriving the union of a bunch of money, and it allows people to express themselves even if they're part of a collective bargaining agreement where the majority at one point or other voted in the union. But some of the individuals that oppose the union, this allows them to continue their opposition to the union. And so in many ways, right to work is just another nail in the coffin of the labor movement that's been continuing to go slide downhill, and eventually will probably only exist to any real level in the public sector. And we're getting there already. I mean, the unions are, with manufacturing going away, and I think it'll continue to go away despite, claims otherwise. But with the shifting of the sector to the United States economy, to more higher end goods and services, and more intellectual pursuits, and creation and inventions and stuff like that. With that, that's those jobs generally are professional and don't inure to unionization efforts. So now what's interesting is that it's one of the nails in the coffin for the union movement, right to work. But we're only 27 states, and there are a whole lot of people living and working in those remaining 23 states. And so, especially out on the East Coast and in California, and there's a lot of unions, especially out on the East Coast. So there's a federal bill that's going out there, and we'll see how much traction it gets. But it would basically change the National Labor Relations Act, which allows people to unionize and organize. It would amend the National Labor Relations Act so that all employees could opt out, and so it would essentially make the entire country right to work. And I would say that might be, if not the final nail in the coffin, it might be pretty close. I think in my HR tip of the week last week, I think I called it the hydrogen bomb to the labor movement. In other years, some sort of news about this coming out and Congress pursuing something. I mean, we have an entirely Republican Congress, so it makes it would surprise me a little bit if they didn't get a lot of traction on changing the National Labor Relations Act to make the entire country right to work. But in other years, that would be so newsworthy, and it would be immediately fought, and lines would be drawn, and people would be on the TV and talking, and sky is falling and all this. It would be a huge ramped up effort. But I think because there's been so much going on the last few weeks, for better or worse, or up or down, or sideways or backwards, ways or forward, however you want to look at it, there's been a lot going on. It's almost like this has kind of gone under the radar, and so we'll see what that means. Because if it were to pass and be signed into law, I think we might be able to write the epitaph for private sector unions in this country having any real modicum and potentially any real modicum of political sway going forward as well. So there it is. We'll see what happens. It might go nowhere, but there might be so much other stuff going on that it might get real traction and go under the radar. New EOC strategy. So last fall, and the EOC does this, it had nothing to do with the Obama administration. The EOC, they issue their plan, so their 4-year plan going forward, and so it's they do their priorities and highlights and everything like that, and the commissioners vote on it, and so then that sets the strategy. So here, these bullet points here are the strategy for the EOC's 4-year plan that was issued last, I think, September or August, and will be going forward. And so, the new acting chair, she gave a speech like a week ago, maybe 2 weeks, I think it was a week ago, and she gave a speech a week ago, and she voted, no on several of these things, particularly the systemic stuff. And so she voted no on them, but she, in her first speech, she basically said, "Hey, this is, I'm still supporting the fact that we did vote on these strategic plans." And so, in many ways, if that's the case, now there could be, another vote, and President Trump has to, appoint some people still to the commission, as well as a new general counsel will be coming in. So a lot of faces will be changing, and a lot of votes will be had. And so we could see some definite changes, but we might not see some real action come out of this administration at the EOC level for several years. Now, she even said that she still sees the EOC as having a role in suing employers for employees. Now, that's one of the fundamental missions of the EOC, but the fact that in the first time that she's up there saying it as acting chair, that, yeah, we're still going to be bringing lawsuits on behalf of employees against employers, that I didn't like hearing that. And I, how many lawsuits, she didn't say, and she's not going to say, and she doesn't know. And budgets will determine this as well. But the reality is, it didn't sound like it was going to be a sea change. And the one thing that people were really wanting to hear from her is this EEO-1 report. What is that? I think that might be my next slide. No. So with the EEO-1 report, what's going to happen there? Now, she voted against doing the new incredibly onerous EEO-1 report, which for those of you who are not familiar, if you have 100 or more employees, you need to do EEO-1 reports, and the new EEO-1 reports that are going to start being done in March of 2018, the next one, will require that you provide pay data for all employees. And so that, and you're giving that data to the government. And then by giving that data to the government, it gives them an ability to look at your data and then to bring lawsuits against your company very easily, very quickly. And there's the data right there. It's like exhibit number 1 in the lawsuit is your report, your EEO-1 report for a wage discrimination or gender discrimination claim, equal pay claim. And that was, that EEO-1 report requirement came from the Obama administration, and one of their fundamental strategies or objectives was to raise the living quality and wages of particularly single moms, but women in general, but also, with a particular focus on single moms. And so a lot of the policies and things that all the Department of Labor and the EEOC and the NLRB, a lot of the things that they were doing was directed directly to fulfill this mission of raising the closing the gender pay gap, and then raising the lifestyle for single moms in particular. And the EOC, in doing this EEO-1 report, that was dead on trying to get at that, because we're trying to see, like, oh, what's the pay disparity? You're going to be giving this information over to companies, and the Obama administration was hoping that by doing this, by having to report to the government, that it would force employers to really look at their pay practices, maybe give women raises where they see that there are discrepancies, or it would give the government the ability to bring lawsuits. And she didn't say she's going to get rid of that. So that's been, I mean, the EEO-1, I know a lot of people thought, me too, me included, thought that, oh, well, with President Trump, I mean, he's talked about doing, I think it's like a 3-to-1, like for every one new regulation, you're going to get rid of 3 regulations, I guess. So that's what you're gonna do. So I had just assumed that the EEO-1 would be one of those that would be gone in like a heartbeat. I just for sure assumed that, and I don't know if that's going to be the case. We'll see. The new chair is talking about still about supporting it, that sort of strategic plan and everything. So we'll see. Doesn't, a year from now, we could be completely shown something different. on this issue. But for now, it looks like the EOC is going to stay relevant and active in our daily lives, though I expect they're going to receive less funding from Congress going forward, and specifically funding for wage and for enforcement. So, but we'll see. Paid time off and the minimum wage movement. For those of you who are on the front lines or are directly impacted by this $15 an hour wage movement, at the federal level, we've seen movement on it for federal contractors. So, but not at the raising the national minimum wage, which continues to be, relatively low. But a lot of states have raised their minimum wage in the meantime. So the movement has shifted, has given up being at the federal level, has gone to going down to the state and local level. So at a lot of these, for example, here in Minnesota, we've changed the minimum wage, like a lot of states have changed the minimum wage, and it's well above the federal minimum wage now. And then cities are also getting that. So you see like San Francisco and Seattle, just off the top of my head, a bunch of these cities that tend to be pretty left-leaning. They're raising their minimum wages, and they're going up to like $15 an hour, and that's kind of the goal, to get people up to $15 an hour. There's been some stuff said by here. Actually, I will go to the slide. Okay, so we'll go back to Ivanka Trump in a second, but President Trump has, on the campaign trail, he's talked about the minimum wage is too low. Like, it should be $10 an hour. It's too low. And then he's also said, we should raise it some, whatever somewhat means. But he's basically been in favor of some changes to the minimum wage. But then, in a more classical Republicanism statement, which makes sense to me, is that he then said, well, that should be something determined at the state level, right? So classical Republicanism, like small r Republicanism, that should be a state-driven thing. And so we'll see where this goes. I don't know. I think there's still a lot of enthusiasm and energy to change the states at the state level, but most of the states that are malleable on this issue have already kind of changed. So most of the non-southern states, basically, I guess, is the way to put it, and some southwestern states. So yeah, most other states have all changed the minimum wage to raise it. We'll see if anything happens at the federal level, though I just cannot imagine with this Congress that there would be a raise to the minimum wage. Childcare and maternity leave. Again, this is where it's hard, because with this Congress, I don't see any real opportunity for paid leave. However, Ivanka Trump, she talked about it on the campaign trail. I believe she talked about it at the convention, and she has, I think, been put in charge of doing something by the president on this issue. But she has talked about a 6-week paid maternity leave, so just for moms, not for dads, but paid maternity leave for 6 weeks. A few states have done this. I mean, New York has really probably done New York has the most innovative program on that they just passed last year in this issue, and maybe that's where she's getting her ideas. But this is definitely a Democratic issue. I mean, I remember when Ted Kennedy this was his baby long ago. He was pushing for paid time off just generally, and this is the supporters of this at the local level. We've seen a lot of movement on this just like with the $15 minimum wage. People, they just flip their sign, so they're like, yeah, $15 minimum wage, and then they go to the next rally and they flip their sign and it's like paid time off. That's what we want. And so we've seen that there's been a lot of activism on it at the local and at the state level. Not so much at the federal level, because Republicans generally, that's not part of what they're all about. But here we have a Republican president whose daughter is now looking at doing this, and she's even starting to put together a bill. I suspect the Democrats would be all excited about it. So maybe, paid time off. Paid time off, the conversation around paid time off has changed in the last few years. Unlike the paid time off conversation, it is not I'm sorry, where it has changed is that departments of health and medical people have started to get into the conversation saying, look, people, for the better health of our population, we need people to have time off. We don't need them to come into work when they're sick. We need them, to take time off. On the maternity side, the Trump plan would probably only be limited to the maternity side. And there's, I'm sure a billion different studies about taking time off after you have a baby to be with the baby. It's probably a good thing, I'm sure. Having had several kids, I recall it, babies liking to be with their moms and stuff. So, so that's where this debate is going, and we'll see. I guess I would expect that we would see some sort of paid time off in the future, but we'll see. EEO1, already talked about it. Forgot that I had a slide on it. The new overtime regulations, which I think I gave well over a dozen seminars and webinars on that topic alone last year, and I'm not going to bore everybody with the details of the regulation under the Obama administration for the new overtime regulations, raising the salary to $47,000 and change, because I don't think they're ever going to happen, at least not for the next 4 years. Those regulations were put on hold right around Thanksgiving, before December 1, when they were supposed to take effect. And a lot of employers, and many of you on this phone call probably included, had spent a lot of time and energy in getting ready for those new regulations. I know I was working with a lot of companies on the communications and different plans and analyses, and figuring out exempt and non-exempt issues. And there was a lot of work put into it, and then it all came for naught, for better or worse. I don't see this going anywhere. I don't see the department being authorized by the government, by the executive branch to pursue this lawsuit, to try to overturn this injunction. So I would say that until a Democrat is in office in presidential office, I would say that we probably won't have to worry too much about overtime. At least not the overtime regulations that were proposed and just about implemented just a couple months ago. So you may be able to just delete or flush that knowledge from your brains. I know that I've spent a lot greater percentage of my life than I like to admit now learning those regulations and doing a whole lot for companies that I'd like to have back, and everybody would probably like to have the money back on it. So workplace safety, we have, let's see, we got about 10 minutes. So workplace safety, we are looking at the new 300 reporting that took effect on January 1. And, President Trump has said that he may repeal the 300 report. I could see that, like the EEO1, I could see it being part of, one of those 3-to-1 regulations that you get rid of. So we'll see. The rules have already started they already went into effect January 1, but they're being rolled out over a 2-year period. So they're, it's not too late, I guess, to do something on this. So I could see the OSHA 300 reports being undone as well. So just kind of put that in the back of your mind. But for now, we have to continue to go forward as though they are the law of the land until we hear otherwise. And yesterday, OSHA is governed by the Department of Labor. And a bunch of the slides, the things that I was going to talk about, were kind of premised on that guy being the department. I can't remember what his name is. He's like past history now, but being the new Secretary of the Department of Labor, but he pulled his nomination, and so we'll get a new Department of Labor person, and we'll see, with this this $15 an hour and paid time off and joint employer issues, we'll see where this new Secretary of the Department of Labor goes with that. I think that that'll be telling. Who gets nominated and what industry they come from in that sort of thing. I mean, if it's another person from fast food who's fighting $15 an hour minimum wage, there's going to be probably a bunch of protesting and fights in the street on it. So we'll see. But OSHA would be under that framework of the Department of Labor. So the new, depending on the perspective of the new Department of Labor secretary that gets nominated and probably pass through, we'll find out what they believe. The Affordable Care Act. For those of you who don't know what the Affordable Care Act is, I'm totally kidding. Everybody should know what the Affordable Care Act is at this point. So, it's going to go away. It's got to go away. I can't imagine. I mean, I would think that would be pretty crazy for Republicans to have, after having complained about this for so long. I mean, I think they've already started voting on various appeals of it. So it's likely to go away. I think we could plan on it going away. When it's going to go away, who knows? But obviously there's the employer mandate issue, and there's the offering of medical coverage to children under the age of 26. So there are a bunch of issues with that, especially with the employer mandate. And all the complexities that go around with the employer mandate and the fair pay, contribution that employers need to make if they're not offering affordable coverage for covered employees. But one of the issues that we don't talk about as much with the Affordable Care Act that would go away, and Minnesota's got a law on this, but a lot of states don't, is the break time for nursing mothers, part of the Affordable Care Act. So, I mean, one of the things that the Affordable Care Act is a lot of things, for better or worse, but one of the things is that it changed the Fair Labor Standards Act to give breastfeeding moms time to go and express milk during work, and it also required that employers set up special rooms and some of the law, and basically offering them privacy and reasonable time off for that. So that's actually from the Affordable Care Act. So and it's also becoming just widely used as a result, maybe because of the Affordable Care Act, maybe not, but for the most part, employers are now setting up private space for mothers who need to express milk. So if the Affordable Care Act goes away, a lot of these mothers' rooms in the states, which is most of the states that don't have their own nursing mother break rules, well, this requirement that you have mothers' rooms and allow them time off to express milk, it goes away. So I don't know what employers will do with it. They might continue to keep it. It could be a cultural thing, but in any event, without the Affordable Care Act, this might go away, and so you might be able to reclaim that room if you're not in a state that requires that you allow mothers to have the opportunity to express milk during work time. So we'll see. I can see that being one of the, when they talk about the Affordable Care Act, they talk about the things. The problem with the Affordable Care Act is that people, when they're polled, they say that they like the Affordable Care Act, but then when they're polled, the same people are polled, they don't like the Obamacare. And so I think that makes it hard to entirely get rid of all aspects of the Affordable Care Act. And I think the break time for nursing moms is probably one of it's not a top ticket item or anything for the United States population, but I think it's fairly well regarded as far as provisions of the Affordable Care Act go. Okay, let me read some of the questions. how will the 6-week pay affect short-term disability pay? And that's a really good question. So first of all, we don't have any written rule on this. We don't have a, so I can't point to some language and say this is really what they, they're in the early stages of this. What it probably would do is that if it's paid time off, I mean, well, I don't know. It could depend on the policy, the short-term disability pay policy. Does the disability pay policy allow for a windfall payment? More likely than not, it wouldn't. More likely than not, you'd either have it'd be an either or situation where you'd have the paid time off, and then if you want beyond that, you would get maybe 6 weeks of short-term disability pay to go for the full 12 weeks that would be under FMLA if the person's at FMLA eligible and FMLA eligible employer. So I suspect there would not be a windfall situation where somebody would double down on it, but it's hard to know without seeing the language and without knowing what the short-term disability policy looks like. It's I can't say with any real certainty. Would there be issues about employees prohibiting employees from participating in a union? And I'm not sure if you mean employees prohibiting employees from participating in a union, but for right now, that's, employees prohibiting other employees from participating in a union, that's not part of what right to work is all about. Right to work is really about forcing employees to pay full union dues, even if they're part of a collective bargaining agreement where the union is still representing them for purposes of bargaining before their employer. What do you know about the St. Paul and Minneapolis implementing paid time off for all employees effective July 1st, 2017? That's going forward. That has, that doesn't have anything to do with Trump. That's definitely going forward at the state level. They're trying to get a bill to say that cities, and a lot of states do this. I think Texas has the same, where they basically say, Austin, stop making your own rules on wage and hour issues. A lot of overall conservative states put the kibosh on their left-leaning cities to stop making differential laws that normally negatively impact businesses. And Minneapolis and St. Paul have done essentially that. And the House and the Senate are likely to pass a bill saying that cities can't do that, but that bill is also likely to be vetoed by the governor. So we'll see what happens. But otherwise, it's guns forward, blazing forward on Minneapolis and St. Paul paid time off rules starting July 1. Thank you for all the questions. That's it. We are done. It is February, and next month, I think it's March 16th. We'll be having our next webinar as well. I appreciate everybody's participation. My apologies again that we started a few minutes late because of the microphone issues. If you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to me. Otherwise, I wish everybody a nice month. Thank you.